This week on BlackBusters Remixed.
If you keep going down this path, you'll never find a way home. All your friends will be white. All your fans will be white. And then ultimately, what's going to happen, and this could be the fear of it all, is they will never understand you. So he's doing jokes, like thinking he's fully crossed over, and his career starts to plummet because he's lost that thing that made him interesting to begin with, which was cultural perspective.
BlackBusters.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to BlackBusters Remixed. I'm gonna say it. The arguably best black movie review podcast in the world. World, Craig. I'm your boy, Tone. I am joined by the lovely and intelligent Jada Fade. And we are here at BlackBusters Remix. My girl, how are you?
I'm good. I'm tired, though. The holiday season, it be having you trying to finish that fourth quarter strong. So, how are you?
I'm trying to get all the starch out my body from Thanksgiving, all the sugar out your body. I'm on the treadmill. I've just been stuffing my face with food over the holiday season, and it's time to get right.
Yeah, same.
It's time to get right. Same page.
Yeah.
So this will be our last holiday podcast. This will be the last kind of like Christmas theme movie that we do. Both Jay and I will be on fitness movies once we hit January. We are super excited for what we have popping for you guys in January. We've got some heavy hitters. But first, before we can turn the page on 2024, we did one last Christmas movie that we are going to attempt to remix. And that movie is Scrooged. I'll give them a little bit of the details, Jay. Scrooged is a 1988 Christmas movie. I think people will call it a dark comedy, a black comedy. It is based on the 1843 novel A Christmas Carol from Charles Dickens. It stars Bill Murray, Karen Allen, John Forsythe, Bob Goldthwait, Alfre Woodard is in it. And essentially it tells the story of Frank Cross, ruthless, cynical president of a television network. The movie had a $32 million budget. It went on to be a $100 million film, which would be considered to be quite successful by Hollywood standards. It is one of those staples in mainstream holiday movies. You've got National Lampoon's Christmas. You've got A Christmas Story. You've got Scrooged. Some people put Die Hard in the category. And so this was Scrooge. Now, Jay, this was your first time watching Scrooge. What were your initial reactions?
I ain't like it.
You ain't like it, huh?
I ain't like it. I was like, oh, okay, this is what we doing. I had a hard time getting through the film. Now, there were elements to it that I really did enjoy, but I think that comes from like the original Christmas Carol movie, like the actual beginnings of this story are, it's a beautiful story, but I felt like this particular retelling of it I was not a fan. And I love Bill Murray. I think he's great. I did not like him and this, I guess this is a testament to his acting skills because he wasn't meant to be likable, but I heavily disliked this film.
Yeah.
So
it's one of those movies where if you like Bill Murray, and again, it's interesting that like, you're like, I like Bill Murray, but I don't like this version of Bill Murray. There are some people that find Bill Murray to be hilarious. There are some people that are like, I just don't get it. Right. And this movie is interesting. I think what helps this movie is the great story of A Christmas Carol. Right. Like evil Scrooge being visited by, three ghosts, needing to change his life and finding the Christmas spirit. So I think you've got that particular trope that works. And then you've got Bill Murray. Like the best parts of this movie are, in my opinion, the ghosts. Like the ghosts are the best parts of the film. They really kind of make the film. And the film does have, I think, a heartwarming ending, which is interesting because the movie ends with like this impassionate rant, by Frank, in which he's been touched by the Christmas spirit. I did like the emotional ending. It does kind of land for me.
I felt I felt like it was a bit disjointed, in all honesty. Like that final speech to me was, and you can kind of tell that the director's choice to let him kind of ad lib that entire speech had a huge impact on why it felt so disjointed. Like it seemed almost out of character a bit for like who we had seen Frank previously as. It was just a very big like, but that's not, maybe I'm being judgy, but even his like he had said something about have you ever seen Little Shop of Horrors? Even when he's like, feed me Seymour at the end, I was like, the fuck is that about? Like, where did that come from? Like, it was just I felt like overall the ending was solid, but disjointed, like most of the film for me. But I do agree that like the people who played the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future, well, not really people, because that TV screen wasn't a person.
Right.
Yeah, you get what I'm saying.
I get what you're saying, and and I don't like starkly disagree. Like I totally believe that like Frank Cross could be back to being an asshole by the 1st of January, right? like I think like he might have been overcome in the moment, but it is what it is. But what I really wanted to do was I couldn't wait to get into the remix conversation about not just this movie, but the Scrooge concept as a whole. I'm assuming I know the answer, but Jake, can this movie be remixed? Can it be remixed to focus on a Black character and Black people?
1,000%. I think the best part of how, I don't want to call this movie bad because it's such a favorite for so many people. Like I did my research and I went and looked at like the overall consensus of this film. And I know I'm going to piss people off by like disliking it as heavily as I do. However, like I think how bad it is to me made the reimagining process even more fun. Like remixing it. Yeah. Cause I was like, well, who would really make this work though? Like who would really take these characters and that's not to say that Bill Murray and what is her name?
Karen Allen?
Yeah, Karen Allen. Let me see. Mary Lou Retton, Buddy Hackett, Paul Schaefer. Like they had some really dope people in this. He even had his own like biological brothers in it. Like members of his family. And I think everybody did a good job. I just think like the remixed version of this would be amazing with an all Black cast for sure.
Okay, so let me ask you. I agree 100%. The only question that I had kind of going in is, I think you could remix this with a Black actor, a Black center, and I think you could do it 3 different ways. You could keep him as an executive, right? I like that option. I also thought like it could be interesting if he was like a big time comedian, right? Like a big time comedian, maybe coming back home for the first time to do, a big concert on Christmas Eve. And then I thought it could equally work for like if this was like a big time singer who maybe was a part of a group first and is kind of doing their homecoming kind of concert. I thought about ways of putting our Frank, for lack of a better word, back in familiar environments, like maybe kind of back to his roots. But I think it could also equally play out as an exec. But my recommendations for the recast are kind of built on what direction you want to go with it. So I toss it back to you. Where do you want Frank to be in his life and in his profession on the remix?
I love that idea of him being a comedian. I think though it might be a little, because comedians can be, well, funny. I don't know if Frank's character is a naturally funny guy, even though obviously Bill Murray, who plays him, is funny and his comedic timing is impeccable. I don't know that the character of Scrooge is meant to be a funny guy, but I do agree that would be a really fun way to like remix it. So I'm with the comedian idea. Like I really am. And with my remixed choices, I think it fits really well.
Okay. Because for me, like I thought about like with Black people in particular, one of the big things in our community is forgetting where you came from. Right. And Frank totally, like Frank in the real Scrooge movie totally forgets where he came from. Like totally forgets like those humble beginnings, like totally, forgets, his mom and his little brother. And he's worked hard his whole life. He had this love of his life, but nothing was maybe more important than Frank kind of getting to the top. And then he gets to the top and he's there and he kind of pulls the ladder up behind him. And so, for us, for our community, that's a sign of real disrespect and we don't tend to rock with people who we feel as though have forgotten where they came from. In fact, we kind of demand our celebrities, our entertainers, our politicians to a certain extent to reaffirm, almost like to refresh. You need to renew your black card license, right? Like, let us know that you haven't let Hollywood kind of go to your head. And I thought that would be an interesting place to put a comedian who has come up from, the black club circuit to ascend to the highest levels. And I immediately thought about Kevin Hart. I thought about Kevin Hart as the person to kind of play my Frank. What do you think? And what do you got?
I like the idea of Kevin Hart, and I also like the story you're painting with him. With that story, I think those two things go really hand in hand. Like I like that. I went in a different direction. Mm-hmm. Still a comic, I guess. I'm stuck between two people though.
Okay.
Mike Epps and Marlon Wayans.
Oh, very good. Very good choices, Jay.
I couldn't choose between them. I just thought Marlon's, like, I don't know if you saw him on the new Fresh Prince, Bel-Air, playing the father role. I just thought he did such a good job of like balancing the weight of that role and kind of being an asshole. Like he has some very asshole-ish tendencies in that show. And I could really see him playing someone like Scrooge. And then you have Mike Epps, who we've seen like kind of play these roles in the past where he's kind of selfish, greedy, shit like that. So I could see him bringing the levity to the role while also being believable in his selfish demeanor.
Yeah. You're so good at this.
Like Kevin too. But I do like Kevin because I didn't think of him, but he had that, like, that's his story. The story you just painted, that's his story of growing up in the circumstances he did in the comedy circuit. And then, like, I don't know how he acts now. I can't say whether he kind of
I like your Marlon recommendation. And the reason why I like it is that Marlon has the range to portray the emotion that I think we need from Scrooge, right? Like we need like Marlon aligning with the Christmas Carol theme is going to go to some dark places. Like he's going to go to some places that are going to make him sad, that are going to make him happy, that are going to make him remorseful or regretful, right? Like, and Marlon, I think, has the ability to navigate all of those ranges of emotions while also giving us the funny kind of stuff that Bill Murray gave us, which is like responding comedically to a ghost or responding comedically to something there. Like, I think that like we kind of need a firecracker. We kind of need a live wire to do this. And I think if you go with an Epps or a Kevin Hart, fantastic comedians, but have they shown us that they have the full emotional range for the transformation that Frank goes through, that Scrooge goes through at the end to be believable. And if you can have someone that can take you on the emotional journey of their past and present and future and then nail the emotional ending, then I think you've got a W. So I think casting Marlon is perfect. I sign off on that. Yay. Okay.
Although I do think I think these other two gentlemen could do the same. I think it would just be in a different way. Like it would be in a very different way.
So we've got Marlon. He's our comedian. Do you want him going back home for a Christmas Day show, or do you want him doing, Madison Square Garden in New York? Where do you want to put him in terms of the environment?
I think Madison Square Garden. So you're telling this story now, like we're doing the story of it all.
Yep.
Okay. because now I gotta figure out how we're gonna line up Claire in this with
Yes.
the story.
Yes.
So I first of
Okay. So.
all, thoughts on Claire.
Mm-hmm.
Both me and Miles watched this movie together, and he brought up, and I completely agreed, Regina King.
Yes. It kind of works.
Yeah.
It kind of works
With Marlon?
with Marlon. The only other option that I might have had, and again, it is what, like, I look at our Scrooge being with someone who was down to earth, right? And then his ego, his success, his drive to be the best rips him away from that love of his life, which is kind of like what happened with Scrooge. So I went a little bit more understated, but if we're going with Marlon, like I went with Rashida Jones because I was going for the softer approach. Like in the movie, like Claire isn't funny. Like she's there to be kind of like the heart, the anchored heart, the lighthouse, if you will, that, like, you know, once Frank is ready to come home, she's always going to be there. So I wanted to go with somebody a little bit more nurturing. But I think if this is based on a comedian, you know, his Claire could have kind of came up with him in the comedy circuit. Like she could have been a comedian herself, right? Like or a promoter at the club. Yeah, exactly.
Are you thinking of Regina Hall?
Oh, you went Regina King.
Regina King.
Oh yeah, that's even better.
Yeah, I was because I do have a place for Regina in this, but I thought Regina Hall would be great for the Ghost of Christmas Present.
Okay.
I could see her banging Marlon in the head and being very, you know. But no, I was thinking more Regina King because we got to think about Regina King and what is that movie with? I think it's with. I don't want to get this wrong. It's called 7 Seconds, and she plays a mom in 7 Seconds. And she plays a mom in Enemy of the State with Will Smith. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
And in both of those films, she has a very nurturing persona. With Regina, I feel like she can pull that nurturing role off because of her, you know, like she exudes warmth to me.
I think you're spot on. I think that, like, Marlon as our Scrooge, Regina as his, you know,
Claire.
long lost, his Claire, basically. Let's do your ghost. Let's do your Christmas past. Let's do your present, and then let's do your future before we get to like trying to remix the story a little bit.
Okay, I want to hear yours first.
Okay, I'll do mine.
Okay.
So my Ghost of Christmas Past, I put Daveed Diggs from Hamilton.
Oh, hold on.
Yes, search Daveed Diggs. He's been in a couple of other things.
I like Daveed.
Yeah, I thought about The Taxi Driver, right? And I thought it, and you know, Daveed, he's got those Jamaican roots, so you know, I thought he could really like lean into the wagwan, right? And he can be pretty bombastic. So that was my choice for the Ghost of Christmas Past. For the Ghost of Christmas Present, I picked Natasha Rothwell from Insecure fame.
Ooh, I love Natasha.
Natasha, and I wanted her to like fuck with Marlon the same way, you know what I mean? Be very physical and funny. And then for my Ghost of Christmas Future, I went with Coleman Domingo. He's got that menacing kind of look to him. You know, he's got that menacing kind of growl face. You know, maybe we give the Ghost of Christmas Future a little bit more to do than just kind of stand there and be the Grim Reaper. So I thought about, you know, you put Coleman Domingo in a black suit and a trench coat and let him, you know, give that gravelly voice. And that was my ghost for my pick for Ghost of Christmas Future. What you think? What you got?
I like your choices. I think they're very like unexpected choices. I wouldn't have expected Coleman Domingo at all. I would say for Ghost of Christmas Past, who I have listed here is, let me see. Are we allowed to gender swap?
Of course, 100%.
Okay. I chose. I can't pick. It's hard. I know.
Yeah.
I should have like really. I would love Dave Chappelle as Ghost of Christmas Past.
That's fantastic.
I would
That's
love
fantastic. If we could get him, hell yeah.
It would be impossible. I don't know if he would do that.
I mean, the fact that this movie is Scrooged, and the fact that it centers on a comedian, and in some cases might tell the story of the life of a comedian, you might be able to secure top tier comedians like a Dave Chappelle to be a part. And it isn't like a big part, right? Like, that character is going to be in there for, roughly 15 minutes of actual screen time. And really it's about just kind of like navigating our character to these places in his life before. So maybe you could get a Dave Chappelle, but that's a great choice. That's a home run. That's a home run choice, but a great one nonetheless.
Thank you.
Who you got? And then who did you say you have for present?
Okay, so I can't choose between Regina Hall and Taraji P. Henson. Taraji, she has so I'm sure you've seen the sketch, the bank robbery sketch, where Kevin Hart is trying to rob the bank and Taraji is in there. And he's like, get on the ground. And she's like, this is a new suit. And like all of that stuff. She just like, Taraji is so silly. I feel like she would really pull that off well for Ghost of Christmas Present, because there is so much physical comedy in that too. I think that Regina Hall would also be a great choice, mainly because the physical comedy element, and because she was so like, she was meant to be, the director asked for like a more demented Glinda the Good Witch vibe.
So
I felt like a
Timu Glinda, right?
Yes, a Timu Glinda. So I was like, damn, I know that Regina Hall would pull that the fuck off, and she would give that like very like sprightly vibe, while Taraji would probably bring a much more nuanced approach that's a little bit more like I want to say mean. I want to say mean. Only in a way of like, and I don't know if you peeped this, but I enjoyed how the different ghosts, although they're representing past, present, and future, they both treated him in the same way that he treated himself in those time periods.
I'm the Ghost of Christmas Present.
Did you notice that? Like how Christmas Present was like literally beating his ass because he has so much self-hatred. I thought that was really interesting.
Like whipping him into shape, right? And they all kind of have, what's interesting is they're not really there to torment him, right? Like the Ghost of Christmas Past actually has compassion for him, right? Like, he's a bit of an asshole and he's smoking that cigar, but like Niagara Falls, Frankie. You know what I mean? Like I understand that you're going through some stuff. The Ghost of Christmas Present is empathetic too, but she's like, I'm not with the bullshit. Like, as long as you act right, I don't have to hit you with this toaster, right? Like, as long as you act right, but you're not just going to be in here bullying me, right? Which I thought was dope. And I think that like both of your choices, I think, align well. It really just kind of depends upon like where we put this character. I do think that the meanness of Taraji could be awesome. But I also think that the quirkiness of Regina Hall could be awesome here as well. So it really kind of just depends on like where we want the volume. I think Taraji is interesting. I think she's interesting in terms of her ability to not only be mean, but her ability to convey empathy as well, which is kind of what the Ghost of Christmas Present does. So I like that choice. Who you got for future if you're ready to move on?
Who did you say for future?
I said Coleman Domingo.
Coleman Domingo, right? I really like that choice. I don't have like who I had. I don't think that I don't think we could get her. So that's why I was asking about gender swap earlier. I put Angela Bassett.
Ooh, Dark Angela, huh?
Dark Angela.
Dark Angela.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, if I look back at her stuff on American Horror Story, right? Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I think both work, and I think in our movie, like, we give our Ghost of Christmas Future something to do, right? Like in the original Scrooge, that character doesn't even talk at all. That character is just kind of like an escort. I
Mm-hmm.
think that our Ghost of Christmas Future needs to be able to say something to our Frank about, like, if you don't get your shit together, like if you don't remember where you came from, if you don't, align, your future is dark and grim. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think both Angela and Coleman can deliver that monologue and deliver that speech, which
Yeah.
is ultimately what we need to thrust our Frank. Because when Frank goes from the Ghost of Christmas Future, the fear, he's been softened up by his trip to the past and his trip to the present, but the fear is what propels him and serves as the final baptism. So that once he arrives in the regular timeline, he's had the full range of emotions and he wants to live. Like, in the Scrooge movie, I want to live, I want to live, I want to live, I want to live differently, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we need our Ghost of Christmas Future to really kind of deliver that punctuating blow. And I think
Yeah.
both of those choices do that.
I agree. I will go. I still like your choice better.
Mm-hmm.
And not because I don't think Angela couldn't deliver. Like, you're totally right. They will both do it in phenomenal ways. I like the idea of, one, avoiding the gender swap, because it's not really necessary in this context, but also I just think, like, I would like to see those two on screen having that
Yeah.
conversation that you just
Yeah.
described.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also recognize that more often than not, especially for Black men, their voice of reason is often a older Black woman.
Yeah.
So, like, both could work for different reasons in a variety of ways, and be really beautiful. So let's jump into some of these side characters, because I have some
Okay.
interesting choices for those. For the employee that gets fired, who did you have in mind?
I had Lil Rel.
Little Rail?
I had Lil Rel.
I like that. I like that. I love that, actually. I like that better than my choice. I went with Lamorne Morris.
Yeah.
Or Lakeith Stanfield. I couldn't decide between the two.
Yeah.
I think that the between the two is what you came up with. Yeah.
Perfect. Did you cast anyone else?
Yes. So Claire's her coworkers, where she works at, I went with Miss Pat and Lunell.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
I just thought they would be so funny in those roles.
That is perfect. Yeah, because I could see them being both kind and mean. Like if our Claire still works at a at a homeless shelter, still has that kind of care, like that. Those could be great scenes. Like just great scenes of them kind of going down. Lunell's a perfect choice.
And having volunteered in those spaces, they usually are super funny, mean people.
Yes, like warm, caring, but like in some instances, no nonsense, like no patience, like
angels on earth that say what the fuck they feel when they feel it.
Yep,
because they know they're a good person.
Don't run no okie doke. Exactly. That's such a great, brilliant point. Which is like when you're a good person, like you don't have to kind of prove it end to end, right? Like you're like I'm kind where I don't have to perform it. That's it right there. That's bar. Okay, so let's retell
the nitty gritties of psychology. Bar.
Bar.
That was.
I like that. You're so smart. All right, let's get into the storytelling of it all. All right, so our guy, we can stick with our guy being a comedian. We can make him be an exec. I think making him be a comedian is a good enough wrinkle, so it's not just an exact kind of like retelling of the story. And I kind of like it where like our guy comes from maybe just a small town somewhere, and like used to have to like be at the open mics and wait to get on, and needed a lot of like help from either like veteran comics or bookers or, you know, club owners. And so, you know, like, I think you keep the premise the same, you know, like he might be in a dressing room somewhere, a green room somewhere, you know, here's some spooky shit, like gets visited from, you know, that go-between kind of character who lets him know that like tomorrow you're going to be visited by 3 ghosts. You know, it could be about him doing like press, like up until the time he meets the first ghost, he could be doing all the things that a top comedian does. He could be going on like, you know, local radio. He could be going on the Today Show. He could be going, you know, having a little press conference, and all the funniness that you can kind of infuse in there. And then he gets visited by the ghost of Christmas past. How would you do that? Where would you do that? What do you think would be a cool way to bring our Black Scrooge to the past?
I think depending on his upbringing, because I'm thinking about how we saw it happen in this original Scrooged. And from what I recall, he got in a taxi that he stole. So obviously his own misdeeds are what lead to the consequences where he meets this ghost. So I would say in a circumstance where we have Marlon Wayans playing a very well-to-do comic that's been extremely successful, making a lot of money, maybe he insults someone in the audience to a degree that that person and even other people in the audience are like perturbed by it. And he's receiving backlash from it. Maybe it's going viral on social media. There are people who think it's funny. There are people who don't think it's funny. Eventually a certain realm of people take hold of it. You know, a lot of people like to call them the POC police. I just think it's people who give a fuck, are complaining, and he has to rectify that. His assistant, his manager, whoever that person might be, tells him he, like you said, has to go on the Today Show, Good Morning America, something like that, and talk about what he said, because all these things about his past are coming out of the closet. People have a lot to say about him. He has some skeletons. So before things get worse, you know, like, just apologize to these people. He goes, and of course, because he's Scrooge, he is not truly apologetic at all. It is the most condescending apology possible. He is an asshole about it. Everybody in the studio is absolutely gobsmacked by the shit this man is saying live on air, with no consideration for the children and older people, the elderly, whoever could be watching this anywhere in the world. And when he goes to the dressing room and he looks himself in the mirror breaks, and we enter this realm where this ghost of Christmas past is coming to remind him of who he is, because he's so far gone and so disconnected from community, from society, that he needs that reminder.
I love it. I think that the inappropriate joke is about his community. Right? Like he maybe cracks a joke like, I ain't like them niggas. You know what I mean? Like, you know, or, you know, some sort of like separator, right? Like, you know, like if somebody was going to, like, somebody Black was going to crack jokes about the Black community, and you know, how many
I'm better than you, astute type of vibe.
How many baby mamas do you have? You know, you know, you do know your daddy, right? Right? You know what I mean? Like, you know, something that, like, as a Black person, that's a joke that you should never crack, right? In that way. Like, you know, we'll do baby mama jokes. We'll do a crackhead jokes. We'll do your daddy ain't shit jokes. But it's never done in a way that, like, I'm better than. And so whatever joke he tells is a I'm better than. It's one that shows that he is completely disconnected from his past and origin story. And the tour that he has to go about is because his people are like, fuck you. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we've been riding for you forever. That's how you really feel about us, right? Like, you know, you'll take our money for these tickets. You'll take our money so we can go see your films. You know, you'll take our money when we're watching your shows. But really, you can't stand Black people, right? And that could be the seismic thing that forces him to have to, you know, re-engage.
Thoughts. I think so. There's this thing going on right now, and I'm I'm going to be all over the place and then it's going to come back, okay? Because you just said
I'm with
something
you.
really, really interesting about, like, you know, the people who buy his tickets and who's in his shows and stuff like that, right? There's a thing going on with Cash App for Kendrick Lamar's concerts that are coming up where, like, people with Cash App can purchase their tickets and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And the reason that this is super great is because people who don't often have access to these types of spaces, who cannot afford it, are also usually people with some money in their Cash App for whatever reason, right? We don't got to get into the specifics of that. But Kendrick Lamar is being very intentional about the people that can make it to his concert and who can get in, because what he doesn't want to end up having is a bunch of people who don't look like us in that space. Because why else would he write not like us? Like, let's be for real. So now, if we think about that in the context of this film that we're imagining right now, if he sits and shits on all of us, the people in his community, and now they're complaining and they're asking the questions that you just raised. You know, we're the ones who buy your tickets. We're the ones who fill the stadiums. We're the ones who do this, that, and the third. This is going to lead. There's always a consequence to something. It has to balance out. So if you lose these folks, you gain these. And I think what he gains, I think in the end, I think that speech, that emotional speech we see, is to a whole bunch of white people.
Ooh.
Because they're the only ones that bought his tickets.
Ooh.
Everybody else. You know? Like, I think that would be such a, like, interesting way to tell this.
And you know how I like it? That's so cool. I almost put it as like, that's the future that the Ghost of Christmas Future shows him, right? That, like, if you keep going down this path, you'll never find a way home. All your friends will be white. All your fans will be white. And then ultimately what's going to happen, and this could be the fear of it all, is they will never understand you. So he's doing jokes, like thinking he's fully crossed over, and his career starts to plummet because he's lost that thing that made him interesting to begin with, which was his cultural perspective, right? So it's almost kind of like the sellout's hell. Like, where does a sellout go? Like, you know,
and that's how we get Dave, because Dave can heavily relate to this. So that's like, period.
That's what I'm talking about. I love that. So it's almost kind of like the Ghost of Christmas Future is going to take our Scrooge to, like, sellout hell, right? Where he goes like, and this is how sellouts get punished, right? Because again, Black people are so open and loving and caring and to a certain extent forgiving that we will let our sellouts come back, right? Like, it's interesting. Like, you look at a person like Candace Owens, right? Who, you know, has not been on our side. But there was a time when she was doing Black radio where it looked like, you know, they didn't have a space for her on the political bus that she was on. And there was a whole debate about, like, Candace coming home. You're like, are we going to, forgive her for riding? But I do think that, like, we will let people pivot. Like, we will let, if sellouts admit and atone, you know, don't we let them come home? Like, I'm trying to think, like Clarence Thomas. Like, will we ever let Clarence Thomas come home? Like, I don't know exactly. But one thing that we've never talked about is where the sellout ends up. Like, if he never ends up at home, you know, what is it like to, like, just be a perpetual sellout and to know that you can't come home?
I think that's an excellent way for us to delve into the future of Marlon's character, because ultimately, if we're being a sellout is you experience small things. You know, you might go to the comedy club that you used to go to all the time, and now those same comedians that used to huddle around you, that you used to be a part of, y'all used to have a camaraderie, they walking away.
Yeah.
You come over to the bar, they take their drinks and go elsewhere. You know, like, you become a social pariah in a way. So I think that what you're describing is a great way to kind of segue into that speech, because he's going to know how it feels. Like, you think that you can abandon that for the money, for the fame, whatever, but then you're alone. You're alone and you have no one, and you're sitting by yourself and wondering. And then you're married to, and this is no shade. We don't got no problems with no white folks, but then you married to a white woman, and you got your little interracial babies, and you ain't got no real friends.
Yes,
like that's what it really comes down to. And it's like no problem with marrying a white woman or nothing like that, but it may not be what he necessarily wants for himself, per se.
What did you marry her for?
Right?
Like,
is it
what
a
was
status symbol?
exactly?
Is she aware of that? Does she conflate that with your status? Like, is she okay with it and excusing it because of the money that you make? Are you used by your family? Do you have children who don't respect you but value you for what you can do for them financially only? Like, these are the types of circumstances he could end up in if he views, and there are a lot of, I know you know people like this, and I've met them as well, Black people who view the status of whiteness or who view whiteness, as a status symbol. Yep.
Like, there are people that tap into that. And what I love about what you shared is that, like, does his white wife care that their mixed kids know that their dad's side? Like, you know, are they culturally connected? Right. Does she care enough to know that they know about Black history and Black customs and Black, you know, or is she just like, you know what, listen, we're just going to take you to the right? I think what you kind of described in many ways is the movie. I think that the ghost of Christmas Past takes our comedian to that early time where he was just so excited to be on and be in the clubs, you know, maybe like have him in front of the club, smoking a Black and Mild, you know, playing the dozens with the other guys. Right?
Not even. He's doing the door. Like the comedians I know that have gotten somewhere in their career all started at the door at the Comedy Store. They were letting people in. They were checking tickets. You know? And
that's where he was.
That's where he was.
And these people, these Black comedians were the ones that embraced him. Were the ones that, like, wrap their arm around them. All right, kid, we'll give you 5 minutes, right? Like, you know, we'll give you 3 minutes at the end of the night. And then it's one of those guys who, you know, one of the comics that was supposed to be there that night is sick and goes like, kid, you got your hot 10? You got your tight 10? All right, we're going to give you a shot. And it literally was this same community, this brotherhood of Black comics that not only took him under his wing, helped cultivate him, and then ultimately gave him a shot. And that's what his past was, right? And if we wanted to go back even further, you know, we could go back to the relationship maybe he has with his mother, which is like, you know, like my mom, for example, is one of those women that like laughs with her whole face, right? And there are some people that have laughs that reward you for being funny and reward you for being smart. And when you're around those type of people, you want to be funny and you want to be smart because you want to make them laugh because of the joy that you get back from making that person laugh. And that could have been the relationship that he had with his mom, which is, you know, maybe the only time that his mom was happy or smiling was when he was cracking her up and kind of making her laugh. And that's how he learned comedy and learned how to be funny as a result of trying to make mom laugh.
You bringing that up makes me think of another choice that my man brought up, Will Smith, because I don't know if you read his autobiography, Will.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, he talks about that. He talks about how humor and comedy was a form of a trauma response for him for many years, growing up with an abusive father. And, you know.
I mean, if you get Will to play Scrooge, that's Hollywood. I mean, like that would bring in anybody that you want to cast. I mean, it would be complete A-listers, and it could be very interesting. Not that Will Smith needs to reclaim any position within the community, but there are some parallels maybe between the Scrooge story and Will Smith, in the sense that I don't believe Will Smith ever lost touch with being Black, but I think he was really forced into the upper echelons of exclusivity. And so,
In
it
Hollywood.
in Hollywood, right? Like when you're as big a star as Will Smith is from, West Philly, right?
Mhm.
It could easily have been a situation where Will is culturally disconnected, right?
And
And if he embodied the evil parts of fame, could become this Scrooge character, which is, I ain't fucking with them niggas. You know what I mean? Like I make movies for I don't make black movies anymore.
Mhm.
I don't do black films anymore. I don't do black comedies anymore. I
That would be
do big budget type shit. That either way, like it's an interesting wrinkle,
good.
and I
Mhm.
think it still works. But if we stick with the comedy, we take him, we take him back to his mom, take him back to how happy he was to kind of get on. Maybe even like Regina King, a young Regina King, is in the audience one night while
Mhm.
while he's performing, and he's almost like smitten by her on stage, and gets
Mhm.
to kind of like cracking jokes, and their relationship or the setting up of their first date happens as a result of him like working the crowd and like talking to her. These are all things that I think could potentially work.
I
Um,
agree.
and then so let's say we jump from Christmas past to Christmas present, and then I like everything that you said in terms of like his friends, like the guys that he kind of came up with, and how
Mhm.
they're all still cool, and he gets to see that they're all still cool, like they're all
Yeah.
still doing a show. They're doing a Christmas Eve show too,
Mhm.
not at Madison Square Garden, but maybe at like the Laugh Factory or the Comedy Store or
The
Caroline's.
Comedy Store, somebody's apartment, like they're or just like connecting. Like the
Mm-hmm.
people really underestimate the importance of relationships and connection. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that was one of the core reasons, even between him and Claire, when she comes up to the studio and he chooses the dog character that he was playing,
Mm-hmm.
and meeting up with, I guess, the executive at that time over going to dinner with their two best friends. In her
Right.
mind, there's nothing that beats that. In his mind, his ambition was more important. And to a degree, like in that moment, if I can be honest, and I'm really curious about your thoughts on this as well. I understood Scrooge's, or, in this case, Frank's perspective on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think if every single year you guys spend Christmas with your best friends, what is the difference between it being this week or next week?
Yes.
Of course it is last minute, but like if my boyfriend were in that position where he's been invited out, actually now when I personalize it in that way, because if I was in that situation, I think I would probably say no,
Mm-hmm.
because it's so last minute. Now that I think
Yeah.
about it, like when I was
Yeah.
watching it on screen, I was like, well, she could compromise a little bit. But now that I think about it, it's like, do I really want to work with the type of person that would ask me last minute or expect me? Because he didn't even ask. He expected him last minute to go with him to dinner on Christmas Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Mm-hmm.
that really someone I want to nurture a relationship with, despite whatever they could do for me? Is that really, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think that probably what we don't see is she has probably been compromising for Frank time and time again. That
Mm-hmm.
this isn't an isolated incident of Frank choosing work over her. He
Mm-hmm.
has consistently chosen work over her over some time. And in this particular instance, this might have been one of the few times that they had scheduled where he wouldn't choose work over her. And maybe that's why she stood her ground, which is like, you've been rain checking me or not available, all year long.
Yeah.
And, I got you to commit to this months ago. And
Mhm.
now you're just going to pivot. I think like her speech was more along the lines of like, you know what? I don't think this is working. Right?
Yeah.
Like, and it isn't just because of this. It's because of your consistent pattern of putting everything else over me.
Mhm.
You're not the same guy anymore, right? You're not
Yeah.
the same guy that was goofy out in the snow, bumping heads, or in the, our small apartment. You're on the corporate chain. So
Yeah.
that's what it kind of felt like to me. Like there was a backstory there that didn't get revealed.
Hella
And
good
I
point.
think, in our remix, the same thing could kind of happen, which is like, our comedian is on the way up and he's getting opportunities to do shows and he is missing her birthday, or maybe one of her family members dies and he's missing the funeral. He's just not there for her because I got a gig. I got an opportunity to open for such and such and such. I got an opportunity to work. You know how long I've been trying to get on stage? How long I've been trying to headline or headline this particular show? And so our guy has a consistent pattern of neglect the same way Frank did, which ultimately leads to our loving, lady to be like, you know what? I love you, but go do your thing. Because obviously there's not room for your career and our relationship.
Yeah.
And ultimately, our guy like Frank makes the mistake of going, baby, I'll be right back. And, and maybe when he gets back, like she's all moved out, right? He goes and he has a great show and he comes home thinking it's all good and like she's gone. And then his career just kind of continues. But I think those kind of things in the present are really strong to show what he's missing. You're missing community. You're missing friendship. You're missing love because it's been your career or nothing, right? Yeah. And then I think that brings us directly to what we kind of outlined a little bit earlier, which is the message that the Ghost of Christmas Future shows, which is like, ain't no future in your front, right? Like, who you are and where your support comes, where your inspiration comes, where your talent comes from is from these people, from your community. And if you do not re-engage and reconnect and reinvest in your community, you can look forward to the sellout's hell.
Yeah. 1,000%. I think that's like I would watch this film and really enjoy it. And I think that one area where the original Scrooged fell short for me is these things that we're describing, like these different plot points in the storyline, I think all happened at a pace for me that didn't allow me to fully invest in the outcome. Like I didn't feel fully invested in anything, even their relationship, right? Like I think they do a good job of establishing the importance of the relationship and like, how cute it was. But I didn't believe it. I didn't buy the chemistry between the two of them. I thought that Karen Allen did a great job of trying to connect in that way with Bill Murray, but I did not see the same affinity from Bill's character to Karen's character, Claire. Like I didn't buy it. And I think a large failure, and I could be wrong, because again, this is my first time watching it. I might need a rewatch to catch it. So correct me if I'm wrong. But in one of my favorite books, Save the Cat, that goes all over like the writing process and like story structure and things like that. It's an important element in a story to have your protagonist save the cat. Like they have to do something that gets the audience maybe not fully and completely invested or on their side per se, but at least lets us know that there is some fragment of good in you so I can be invested in the rest of the plot. I don't know that they did that in this film, and I think that's why it was so difficult for me to get through.
It was very thin. Like the kind of bubble gum that loses its flavor after a couple of chews.
Yes.
I think the Save the Cat moment is the inspiration, the Christmas inspiration that touches Alfre Woodard's mute boy, right? Because that's the big emotional moment of that, right? We've seen Alfre Wood, we see Alfre Woodard. We see the energy that she puts into this boy. This boy isn't talking. She's taking him to doctors. This boy and Alfre both appear in Frank's future in terms of the ghost of Christmas future. So there's something about that, about the fact that like this boy never learns to talk, and Alfre Woodard's character, was just in grieved mom. So the fact that when he's in the future and he's speaking this impassioned Christmas speech, and you see the little boy's kind of like eyes light up, like he's connecting to it. And then there's that moment where, he tugs Bill Murray's pants, did I miss anything, little guy? God bless us, everyone, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then that's like the moment where like if Frank doesn't do this Christmas speech, he doesn't inspire this boy to reconnect and re-engage and
Mm-hmm.
start talking.
Yeah.
Very thin, very thin. Not the moment that I want, but that's probably the best. He's like the little boy is the only one that's kind of saved in this.
I would argue that this would be a entirely different movie and much more enjoyable if in that moment where he goes and grabs the boy earlier in the film where they're all on set and he grabs him and shakes him up, asking him what he's doing there. If that were a more nurturing response to the child, that would be an entirely different film. I just didn't care for Frank at all. He had no redeeming qualities for a majority of the film, and saving that moment till the very last beat to me felt lazy and poor writing.
I'm with you. I mean, I think in order for this movie to work, you have to just really buy into Frank. You just have to be all the way bought in. I love
Bill Murray.
Yeah. I mean, the movie, like to put a little love in your heart. Like I like that song, right? Like, you know, and so ultimately, if this movie did not have Christmas as its underlining theme, I think the movie would have been a failure, right? Like, you know, you don't really care about, you know, Frank. And at the end, he just like it was hard for Bill to convey that level of emotion. Right. Like, you know, and so what we have is that we just have like all treble, like just turn the emotional treble all the way up. And we have this guy ranting and raving, but to your point, like it's not scripted. So it's very disjointed. And I could understand that, like he's downloading this information at the same time that he's speaking it in real time. Right. And I understand that. But I think that like, if somebody had decided, let's give him something important to say, and let's take all of these experiences that he's had in his life, along with this revelation that he's had in the future, and let's give him something important to say about Christmas in a way. Now, again, it does have its high points. Like I love that beat where he tells his brother, like, I got you a towel. You know, Grace was the one that got you the VCR. You were right about everything. It's the SS Minnow, right? Like that part was like a little touching, but it's only really touching because of the love that we saw his brother show for him, like earlier in the movie, and how he stood up for him and said, he's my brother. I'm always gonna love him. But I do think that everything that we've done here is dope. But I think what is important, which is the last question on this episode, is who do you trust to direct Black Scrooge?
This
one's tough.
Say, I'm gonna say actually I know who directed oh, I'm tripping. Oh my goodness. This is Robert Townsend. That is what I would trust.
You in your bag, Jay. You're in your bag. That's a great choice. That's a great choice.
Who did you have direct?
I love Jordan Peele for this. Because I would want this movie to be a little dark. To be a little spooky. And again, like I think, not that I think Jordan Peele is a sellout, because I don't, but I think he knows what that world is like to be the only Black person in the room, like with talent. And so like he's, I think, who I would trust to cover the nuance of this film, to elicit the emotional responses that it might need, and to keep it from being like Scrooged, right? Like, you know, like if you cast Will Smith, which is a great casting, or Marlon Wayans, I think like I want someone who understands what we're trying to say. And what the message is for like, don't ever forget where you come from. right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter how much you got. If you forget where you come from, like, you're lost. And so this is a great vehicle for that. So that would be my recommendation. But I think
Jordan would be great at that.
Townsend is hella interesting for this.
Well, Robert Townsend has a history, for me at least, like personally, his films always hit me right here, like right in the heart. Like he just has a warmth to his storytelling, and a knack for like really connecting with the actors and pulling things out of them that I don't know would otherwise be pulled out of them in the scenes that he's also a writer. I would also love for Robert Townsend to write this film. I think he would both write and direct this film really, really well. Like, think about the 5 Heartbeats.
Yeah.
Holiday Heart. And Holiday Heart was a heavy film. It had that element of darkness that I think you're referencing as well, with, a young girl and her mom dealing with drug addiction. And then, of course, you have another character. Like, Robert Townsend was so ahead of his time, even in displaying relationships between, the trans community and the Black community and these overlapping identities. Like, he's just always been really, 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 really solid as a director and writer.
And I would love for his perspective now as a elder visionary creative. Like, I would love for him to continue to have the opportunity to make more films, right? Yeah. And tell more stories. Yeah. And I think, like, not that he's been put on the shelf, but he's been on the shelf long enough for us to go, like, we let Scorsese keep going, right? Like, we let some of these other guys keep going. To a certain extent, like, they've kind of tied a knot on Spike. Like, Spike isn't, directing as much. And again, I'm down for letting the young guys get at it too. But I think Townsend is a really, 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 really interesting take on it. What you've thrown at me this episode has been really dope.
You made some great choices. I'm really
compelling.
I'm happy we did this as a remix. I'm not gonna hold you. When I was first watching this movie, I was like, "What does Tone have me watching?" I was pissed. I did not want to watch this shit from the opening. Yeah. From the opening, no, that's not true. The opening was one of the best parts of it with Santa Claus. How did we miss that? With Santa Claus and the guns and
the
all
guns?
that?
Yeah, all that stuff.
Fantastic. That was funny as hell. That was my speed of comedy, and it was very specific to that time period. But like, I'm happy we remixed this because I like the idea of an all Black cast for this. This seems like out of all the things we've reviewed thus far, the perfect movies to remix.
Yeah. And here's what's so dope. Like, here's what we have kind of coming down the pipeline. Here's what I tentatively have us scheduled for January. Because Jay and I are going to take 2 weeks for the holidays. We've got The Breakfast Club coming up. I believe we have The Karate Kid coming up. We've got the Barbie movie coming up. And then we've got, right now, tentatively, we've got Indiana Jones. And then in February, it looks like we're going to do The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, Pretty Woman, and I think About Time. Jay's going to curate the month of February for us, and we're going to just reconfirm January. But when we come back in the new year, we're coming back with the heaters, right? So, like, Jay and I had an opportunity to do some classics. We've got a rhythm to us. We got a flow to us. We were able to knock out these holiday films. And when we come back in January, we coming back with the hitters. So that's today's show. Super excited to be here. I want to wish all of y'all a Merry Christmas. I'm gonna wish my co-host a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Kwanzaa, Merry Christmas, nigga, all of that type of stuff. And thank you so much for checking this episode out. Have a happy holiday, a safe holiday. We will see y'all in the new year.
Bye.
Peace.
BlackBusters.